Good afternoon, folks, and welcome to another edition of Crime Time with DutyRon and Ed Wallace. You guys know the drill. We're retired New York City police detectives and 9/11 World Trade Center first responders. If you like all things true crime related from the police detective's perspective, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you get all things DutyRon, rookie move, and this guy right here, Ed Wallace, when we go live or upload another video. It's been a long time, but today we're going to cover the murder trial for the New York State former correction officers who murdered Robert Brooks back on December 9th of 2024. He was being transferred from Mohawk Correctional, which is right across the street, to Marcy because of a fight that he had or problems he was having at Mohawk Correctional. He didn't make it into the correctional facility. He was murdered inside the arsenal, inside the infirmary, actually, where they get triage before they come into a facility by a gang of 10 to 14 correction officers. And there were two nurses there during this assault that led to his murder, and they did nothing, and they got no charges. Ed, we covered this extensively. Today, we're going to watch from yesterday because it's not live, the opening statement. Your thoughts on this trial? Only 3 took it to trial. The rest of them took plea deals, 22 years instead of facing a trial, which they knew they would be sunk. These guys are fighting it, and they face, upon guilty convictions, 25 to life. Your thoughts, Ed?
Yeah, this is a big gamble, not taking the plea and going to trial, and especially with that video and how the jury sees that video is going to impact them tremendously. I don't know that that this gamble is going to pay off for them.
Yeah, I mean, I highly doubt it based on the evidence alone, and that's that video that we showed everybody. By a show of hands in the chat, and thank you to the moderators, the replay viewers, the super chatters, Patreon supporters. Ed, we already gave out 5 memberships before we went live. We're going to be doing it. Yeah, we're going to do it again during the course of the live stream. So make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you hit the thumbs up and let us know that you appreciate the live streams and that you love being here. And heck, we're going to send out a couple more during the course of the stream. But for those of you in the chat, by a show of hands, how many of you remember us covering the murder of Robert Brooks? He was 43 years old. He did 90% of his sentence for assault. Yes, he committed a heinous act. He stabbed his girlfriend, the mother of his child, and was sentenced to 11 years in prison. He only had, I think, another 11 months total left to do, and he was getting out for time served, and he was murdered. So by a show of hands in the chat, how many of you guys remember us covering this? And if you haven't, just put a 2 so we know that you know nothing about this case. But again, it was a gang of correction officers, 10 to 14. And we can't forget, we can't unsee that video of him being murdered on the table, on the examining table, taking him off the table, lifting him up by his neck, kneeing and kicking him in the groin and in his stomach and in his testicles, grabbing him by the throat. I believe he had a hyoid bone broken too in his neck, but the medical examiner is going to testify today. Look at all the number 1s. Everybody knows about this. There's just a couple of number 2s. Rhonda hasn't heard of it. Shannon hasn't, but most have. Ed, when we saw this, we were outraged, and there was a lot of people like saying to us from the correction side and our friends that are in the law enforcement field, like, oh, you're being a little too critical on these guys. I mean, how could you not be critical when you see the video of this? I don't care who it was. It doesn't matter who was on that video. He was brutally murdered right before our eyes. And
Indeed. I mean, there's a line, and they crossed the line, and they stopped being law enforcement and became criminals when they crossed the line. Okay. And if you can't see that and you try to make excuses for it, there is no excuses for what happened here. Okay.
Yeah. And Angela in the chat says, you know, he's giving vibes of George Floyd. This is giving worse vibe. This is like George Floyd on steroids, because there was multiple, Angela, as we all know, there was 10 to 14 New York State Department of Corrections officers. They're supposed to protect the inmates. It's a tough job. Don't get me wrong. it's a real hard job. Most people would turn away from it. I personally turned down corrections. I took the test and I said, this is not for me. But it takes a special kind of man or a woman to go inside the walls of these correction facilities, but they're not supposed to go in there and brutalize and murder inmates. And we come to find out that there's a lot of this running rampant in the New York State Department of Corrections and probably throughout many departments across the United States. This is unacceptable. It's barbaric. Look, Two Dog Mom says it was barbaric. Let's take a listen to the local coverage. Again, this is from yesterday, but we are going to cover each day, and it only should be a few days, but let's take a listen in.
Tonight, a newly seated Oneida County jury has a lot to process, having heard opening statements from 4 lawyers in the Marcy prison trial.
It's one of the few chances the whole community gets to see into the courtroom through a camera allowed by the judge. News Channel 9's Andrew Donovan joining us now. He was in the courtroom as both sides laid out their arguments. He joins us from Utica. Andrew, what did you hear?
Well, Christy, a lot of emotion from the Onondaga County District Attorney, who is serving as the special prosecutor on this case in Oneida County. And people who are in courtrooms every day hear these kinds of arguments every day, but it's rare for cameras to be allowed at any part of a murder trial, at least this day and age. This judge, knowing it's a high-profile trial affecting so many people, allowing us access to show you exactly what happened. And the jury heard it for themselves. 4 opening statements, the prosecution's and 1 from each defense attorney, each individually defending their own client. Their arguments lay out what the rest of the trial will detail, a theory that each of these officers had different roles in the death of inmate Robert Brooks, against the defense's theory that these 3 officers on trial didn't know what other violence their coworkers were committing. We're going to play a portion of each of these arguments, so bear with us. First, a rare chance to see Bill Fitzpatrick, one of the nation's best trial lawyers, in action.
You'll see a tape of Robert from that evening, and he's looking into a camera that he doesn't know was on and none of these defendants knew was on, and he's pleading for his life. He's begging someone, tell me what I did wrong. Why is this happening to me?
This trial will not be about whether the video is easy to watch. It won't be. It will not be about whether the officers handled everything perfectly. They didn't. It will be about whether the prosecution proves beyond a reasonable doubt that Officer Kingsley acted with depraved indifference to human life.
So they're going to go on to show all 3 of the defense attorneys defend their clients. And again, this video, and this is not, unfortunately, this is not like a popular thing when you do live streams about this stuff. YouTube doesn't like to put it out there, so they kind of suppress it a bit. But the videos that we showed on the murder of Robert Brooks is what the jury is going to see. That's really the whole case of the state. The state doesn't really have witnesses to call. The defense may call some witnesses. The state is going to bring in a medical examiner to tell the jury about the vicious injuries and the brutal beating and how all of this stuff took a toll on his body and what led to his death. But at the end of the day, defense attorneys have to defend their clients. But when you look at this video, there's nothing more that can be said. And if this video did not roll, these monsters were making stories up, Ed, to justify.
Well, they put it down in official paperwork.
Yeah, to justify, right?
Right. They did their reports, and their reports conflict with what was on the video.
It's disgusting because, again, ladies and gentlemen, let it sink in. Good to see you, ATS News, Lexi, Beamer, everybody that's here, Debbie Galloway. Thank you all for being here. Simi Sharp. Again, these monsters were making up a story that he resisted them and that he, I'm sure that it's available and it may be made available at this trial, but I don't even think the state has to bring those into play here because the video speaks for itself. I want to just play a short piece of the full opening statement, which took place yesterday. This is important because you get to see how emotional he gets when he's talking about Robert Brooks. And and the vicious beating that he took from not just these three, like I said, a gang of correctional officers. So let's take a listen, let's look in, and then we'll be back to you for your comments. This is inside the courtroom yesterday.
Thank you very much, Judge Bauer, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I thank you for your kind attention during the jury selection process, and I would congratulate you. So many of your neighbors were excused. Each and every one of you impressed 8 very, very experienced lawyers in this courtroom to suggest to us that you will decide this case exactly as you said you would, fairly and impartially, and let the chips fall where they may. I hope you are as anxious to learn about the horrible death of Robert Brooks as I am in the next few minutes to educate you about it. What I say obviously is not evidence. I was not there when it happened, and the evidence will come from that witness stand in a few moments. The day in question was Monday, December the 9th, 2024. This country had just finished a very contentious presidential election. Many of us in our own lives were preparing for the holidays, looking forward to seeing loved ones and spending time with family. And for 43-year-old Robert Brooks, it was the last day of his life. Robert was incarcerated at the Mohawk Correctional Facility, a place right here in Oneida County. He was done with about 90% of a state prison sentence that he had received for stabbing his girlfriend in a drug-induced stupor. I don't have to tell you that. It has nothing to do with the case. These gentlemen didn't know what he was in for. They didn't know anything about him. But I don't want you to speculate, so I told you. Robert was one of about 32,000 adult men and women locked up in the state of New York, crimes ranging from drug possession to murder and everything in between. And every single one of those inmates, those incarcerated individuals, had one thing in common. Their welfare, their safety was entrusted to sworn correctional officers who took an oath to do their job, wear a badge, wear a flag on their uniform, and protect those 32,000 people, no matter what they were in for. And among them were those 3 defendants. There are dangerous people locked up in prison. Lord knows I know. I put enough of them there myself. But Robert was reliant on them for protection, for food, for medical care. He was told when to wake, when to sleep, and they killed him. Remember that word, they, because when each of us are subjected to the argument, I didn't do it, I didn't deliver the fatal blow, I didn't lay a glove on him, the other guys did worse, I was just following orders. It doesn't matter because they killed him. Mr. Gallagher, Mr. Kiefer, and Mr. Kingsley, along with several others. They're all charged with depraved mind murder, a carefully orchestrated act, the evidence will show, of sheer unimaginable brutality. The new guy at Marcy, Robert Brooks, met the welcoming committee of these 3 defendants, and in less than an hour, he was dead. Never even unpacked. Never set foot in his cell. Instead, he was in a drawer at the ME's office waiting to be autopsied and for the medical examiner to tell us how he died. It's great to suggest that prisons are dangerous places like we heard on voir dire, how Marcy is so terrible, which would have something to do with the case if Robert ever set foot in Marcy, which he didn't. He only made it to the emergency room. You will witness on tape this depravity firsthand. It will be gut-wrenching. It will be almost beyond belief that these 3 men, sworn to protect Robert Brooks and do their duty treated him with such depravity. So let's review what happened, what the evidence will show. On the morning of December the 9th, 2024, Robert Brooks was an inmate at the Mohawk Correctional Facility. He had been assaulted by other inmates on 2 occasions, December the 7th and December the 9th. Why? Not going to be able to prove that to you, and it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. We're going to put in evidence regarding those assaults simply to show you that they had nothing to do with his death. Rather than deal with whatever was percolating at Mohawk regarding Robert, the officials decided to transfer him to the Marcy Correctional Facility. You'll see a video of Robert that morning while he's at Mohawk. And I want you to pay careful attention to that video because he's going to be being interviewed by a corrections officer, Sergeant David Sayu. I stand here not to tell you with a broad brush that corrections officers are bad people. On the contrary, the overwhelming majority of them are decent people that do a difficult job, and we owe them our gratitude and our thanks. David Sayo is such a man. Contrast to these 3 defendants, you will see a correction officer doing his duty, treating Robert like a human being, which shouldn't be that hard to grasp. Sayu generally wants to find out what has happened to Robert at Mohawk. It's obvious to him that Robert is having issues, but you'll see with your own eyes, you'll see Robert being compliant, being decent, being respectful. In fact, it gets to a point where Sayu feels comfortable enough with him to remove his handcuffs. Again, our medical proof will show that the assaults that took place at Mohawk had nothing to do with Robert's death.
He's basically saying right now, Bill Fitzpatrick, that the sergeant that interviewed him before he left Mohawk was so comfortable with Robert Brooks that he removed his handcuffs. So how is this some person who is acting irrational or being combative when the sergeant that interviewed him upon his exit of Mohawk Correctional, right? Let's take a listen. And again, Robert Brooks did not kill his girlfriend. He stabbed her, which is a bad thing. She is alive today. So some people in the chat were saying that he killed somebody. He did not. And he definitely did stab his girlfriend / baby's mother. And he did his time. He was sentenced to 11 years in prison.
Robert was 5'11". He was a massive behemoth of exactly 148 pounds. In his near decade in state prison, he had a whopping 1 write-up for misconduct. When he left Mohawk that night, everything he had in the world other than his 2 sons was in a couple of duffel bags that he was carrying when he got on that bus. Robert arrives at Marcy Correctional Facility at about 9:07 p.m. 9:07 p.m. And a half hour later, he's dead. He's laying helpless in the emergency room at Marcy Correctional Facility on a gurney. He's got injuries to his head, his neck, his testicles, his liver, his spleen. You'll see a tape of Robert from that evening, and he's looking into a camera that he doesn't know was on and none of these defendants knew was on, and he's pleading for his life. He's begging someone, tell me what I did wrong. Why is this happening to me? And he's also choking and drowning on his own blood. And these 3 defendants, each in their own way, the proof will show, were intimately involved with these acts. They no longer were corrections officers. They were a gang. They took turns, collectively and individually, of punching him, kneeing him, pepper spraying him, choking him, pinning him down, cuffing his legs. The last thing he had to defend himself, his legs. And Mr. Gallagher, you will see, decided to cuff his legs during the beating. Having done this line of work for some time, let me suggest that what's in your mind right now is, surely, Mr. Fitzpatrick, there's more to this. You're leaving something out. He must have spit at the officers. He must have degraded them in some way, insulted their manhood. The truth, the sickening, gut-wrenching truth that you're about to experience is that he didn't do a damn thing. Absolutely nothing.
Ed, you were going to say something?
And even if he did, it doesn't deserve what happened.
Yeah. No matter what he did, nothing justifies taking another person's life, and especially by New York State Department of Corrections officers. These guys are trained to protect and keep the peace with these inmates. They're not supposed to be attacking them, as we saw. And remember, everyone has to remember when we saw this body cam footage, none of them, not a one, had any inclination that the cameras were rolling. I think Gallagher was the only one that like pulled his jacket up over it just in case. So, but none of them had any of the knowledge, and thank God that they didn't, because had they known, they would have gotten rid of or discarded or tried to do something with that footage, or they would have just taken those body cameras off and laid them down. But imagine how many more people these 14 or 10 to 14 correctional officers either hurt severely or murdered and covered up. Think about that. Let that settle in, folks. How many more? That this wasn't their first rodeo. This wasn't the first time for them. You could see how normal this operation was for them. And I'm gonna spare everybody playing the video because I thought about playing a little section of it. But I'm going to spare everybody that. You can go to our playlist and watch it. I played it in full. But how many more inmates did these correction officers kill or severely injure? Think about that. Mr. Fitzpatrick did a hell of a job with his opening. And, again, he describes in previous press conferences that it's not going to be a long trial because the proof of the pudding is in that video that he is going to present to this jury. And that's going to be enough to get across the board guilty verdicts. 25 to life is the maximum sentence. And these three, and in my opinion, every single one of them should be thrown in a hole and just left to rot, because these are not human beings. These are monsters.
He was greeted by these three men and others. David Kingsley and Nicholas Kiefer were part of the welcoming committee, along with Glenn Trombley and Robert Kessler, the latter two who you will hear from during this trial, and they were soon to be joined by Matthew Gallagher. Trombley and Kessler will be witnesses. They've made deals with the prosecution. Had they not made deals with the prosecution, you would never know about the two assaults that occurred to Robert before he was on camera. You can choose to disbelieve them or not, or believe them. That will be up to you. They are two men that will tell you under oath that they will regret for the rest of their lives the cowardly failure to act that they participated in during the beating of Robert. Someone long ago said, an event has happened upon which it is difficult to speak, but impossible to remain silent.
I think also another travesty of justice in this case is that every one of these 10 correction officers were out on bail and never, ever got locked up. While this was all pending, they enjoyed their Christmas. Remember we did this? They enjoyed New Year's Eve. They enjoyed freedom, which none of us, just think about it, Ed. If any of us went out into a supermarket and had an argument with someone and beat them to death, and it was on their cameras in that supermarket, where would you and I be, or anyone else?
Rikers.
We'd be in Rikers Island without bail. Well, in the state of New York, maybe we would get out. And that's the problem here, is that the judges allowed these guys who have obviously, access to firearms. They took all that away. But still, they were allowed to walk free after that video was put out by Tisha James, the Attorney General for New York. That's when we first saw it. Letitia James published it. And she said, before you look at this, I want you all to take care of yourselves. It's a very, very troubling video to look at. And then they allowed all those monsters to walk around out on bail.
And the reason there's a conflict of interest and we have this special prosecutor is because of the laws that stated that the Attorney General's office had to represent these officers.
Right. They represent officers in wrongful, procedures and policy issues that are brought up against the state. So they represent them. That's part of their indemnification, the Attorney General's office. But
and they have open cases with several of the officers involved here.
For beatings. Again, I would bet my pension on that any number of these guys, and I don't know if it could be all of them or some of them or a majority of them, but I guarantee you, Farina and company, these gang members, all these gangs, guys, have either maimed, hurt, or killed New York State Department of Correction inmates.
Well, yeah, they were just too comfortable doing what they were doing. And, so this isn't their first rodeo.
No, definitely not. And you can tell by looking at that video. All you got to do is look at the video, and that'll tell you that they're just all way, way too comfortable. And those two nurses, they should have been locked up as well because they didn't report it. They didn't go at the end of their shift and call the police and say, hey, I just witnessed someone getting killed in our infirmary. And they listed Robert Brooks' death the next day on December 10th. He died right there in that infirmary. He was dead. They went over with their stethoscopes and listened for a heartbeat. And they took those stethoscopes off to one nurse and looked at the COs as like, he's dead. And they had the audacity to bring him to a hospital and pronounce him the next day on the 10th, which is bullshit. He was dead right there in that infirmary, lifeless. And we all know it. Everybody knows it.
That's right. That was the crime scene there and the other two assaults in the van and on the walkway to the infirmary.
And don't forget the cover-up of another correctional officer who wasn't even in that infirmary for any of those beatings. He was ordered to go in and do what, Ed? Clean up the blood. Clean up the fluids.
Crime scene.
So he altered that crime scene.
Disturbed evidence. That's right. Destructed evidence.
Sickening. Look who's here, our good friend Jeff and the missus, the beautiful Mr. and Mrs. Litweiler. Good to see you, Jeff. Yeah, it was a gang. It was a goon squad. It was all of the above. Just a despicable act of murder on video that we all got to see. It was shocking. Let's let the rest of this play and then we'll wrap it up, Ed.
They are two men that will tell you under oath that they will regret for the rest of their lives the cowardly failure to act that they participated in during the beating of Robert. Someone long ago said, an event has happened upon which it is difficult to speak, but impossible to remain silent. Impossible to remain silent. The words of Edmund Burke from 200 years ago. Even today, they explain the decisions of Trombley and Kessler to testify, reluctant as they may be, ashamed as they may be.
Yeah, I just want to say this. Thank you, Harbor View, Kingston. But we have reporters embedded up in the Utica and in that area up north. There's reporters embedded inside the courtroom that will give us live updates nightly. I don't anticipate this lasting more than 4 or 5 days maximum. So we're going to get updates. The medical examiner was slated to testify today, and she will give obviously testimony. It won't be probably long, but she'll get cross-examined by the defense attorneys. Don't forget there's 3 defense attorneys. There's 3 defendants here tried in one trial. So cross-examination and so forth will take up some time. But I don't see this lasting more than 4 or 5 days. You?
No, not at all. And then I doubt these defendants are going to take the stand.
Oh, no. It definitely wouldn't behoove them to get on that stand. That's for sure.
And credible as they may be, to speak about something which is impossible to ignore and impossible to remain silent. Defendant Nicholas Kiefer here, he shows up on the scene, part of the welcoming committee. He heroically pepper sprayed Robert for no reason at all. And you'll watch him throughout the rest of these proceedings. He doesn't participate in the beating in the ER. It doesn't matter. He was part of that gang that assaulted Robert. He disoriented him, made him helpless, and allowed the beating to continue to intensify and result in Robert's death.
And I love that the district attorney here, who's a lifelong prosecutor, he's been there forever, I think 45 years, I looked up on the website. I like that he called them a gang, because that's exactly what they were, Ed. They were acting as a gang together to beat up and ultimately murder Robert Brooks. And you can't, for those of you who are watching this, I got to tell you, I've had side conversations with people who I won't mention names, but I've had side conversations with people from the law enforcement field that actually stood up for these correction officers. And it shocked me. And I said to myself, these are not people who I want to be associated with or friends with. Because if you can try to justify this, what does that make you? Think about it, right, Ed?
Yeah, you're right. You know, every gang has a leader. Every wolf pack has an alpha. You know, so, you know, this was not something that just occurred for the first time. They've done this before. They were just way too comfortable with what they were doing. They were able to control the nurses. The nurses stood by and did nothing. And the nurses, you know, state licensed medical professionals are mandatory reporters.
Yeah.
And what did they do? Did they report this to anybody? No, because they were in fear of these correction officers.
Listen, I'll say this too. During the course of when this was all happening last year in December, we were on this every day. We were doing this. You know, I had nurses who communicated with me. I talked to a few of them on the phone from up in that area, and they confirmed to me the amount of inmates that were brutalized in New York State Department of Corrections custody. It was, my mouth was hanging open speaking to these 2 girls, and they were so upset over it, and they made so many attempts to report these guys, and the amount of shunning that they received and transfers that they received. And Ed, you know how this goes.
Mm-hmm.
You know how this goes. I was in tears talking to the people. And don't forget, I spoke to the Brooks family. I spoke with Robert Brooks' cousin. I spoke on text message with Robert Brooks Jr. I spoke to Robert Brooks' father on the phone. And my heart continues to break for this family, because they had to watch their father, their son, their cousin, their loved one being murdered on live video.
You know, every year New York State makes us take mandatory training. And part of the training also deals with whistleblowers and the whistleblower laws that are supposed to be there to protect you. And I know, you know, I'm not, you know, it's very cynical of me, but I know the truth of the matter is that, you know, these laws don't protect whistleblowers. All right. There's going to be retribution. It happens all the time. There are documented cases of it. And it seems that you're taught to do something, and then when you do it, you're punished. Okay.
Those nurses were scared to do anything because they didn't want to get beat. I'm telling you, those 2 male nurses knew that they couldn't stand up to these guys.
Yeah, and they didn't want to be transferred to another part of the correctional facility, miles and miles away from where they potentially live.
One of the
what do we call that? Highway therapy?
Yeah, exactly. One of the female nurses that confided in me and talked with me on the phone said after she made reports against correction officers, she was transferred 2 hours and 15 minutes from her facility. She now had a 2 hour and 15 minute one-way travel to work because she stood up. Sickening.
He heroically pepper sprayed Robert for no reason at all. And you'll watch him throughout the rest of these proceedings. He doesn't participate in the beating in the ER. It doesn't matter. He was part of that gang that assaulted Robert. He disoriented him, made him helpless, and allowed the beating to continue to intensify and result in Robert's death. And ladies and gentlemen, he's no Uber driver in this play. Robert is passed off to other members of the gang. You'll see a lot of them that are not in this courtroom for reasons that do not concern you.
They took pleas.
And then you will see a sickening video of Robert being hogtied and transported into the infirmary like a dead animal. Not because the defendants wanted to get him help or aid, but because that's where they had to take him, the first stop. With utter indifference and depravity, Robert is hogtied and dragged into that ER. Among the individuals doing that is this defendant, Mr. Kingsley. Now inside the infirmary, Robert is laid out on a gurney. You'll see video of that.
The correction officers who took the pleas received 22 years in prison. 22 years. So
for manslaughter, correct?
Correct. People in the chat are asking how long were all the other correction officers who accepted the plea deals, who didn't want to go to trial because they knew that they weren't going to win. They got 22 years flat sentenced and no trial. So, but again, they were out on the street from December 9th, 2024 until just a month or so ago. They took those pleas, I think last month. So these correction officers who took the pleas are going to do those 22 years minus good time, minus parole. They probably will get out around 17 years or less of time. For taking someone's life, that's a slap on the wrist, in my opinion. They should be 25 to life, just like these monsters are going to get. All of them should be in prison for the rest of their lives. They took another life as a gang. They gang style beat Robert Brooks to death on video. What more do you fucking need? Sorry, not sorry.
He's already dazed. He's confused. He's clearly been beaten severely before the cameras ever capture his image in that ER. Mr. Kiefer has done his part with his blows, and now a fresh set of corrections officers take over. And remember, they killed him, that gang. You'll see.
Moonlight View, I hope you're not friends with those retired COs that told you that they admitted to harming prisoners in the past. I hope you're not friends with them, because those people that you mentioned here are pieces of shit. So I just wanted to put that out there. I love you though, Moonlight View.
Pictures of Mr. Farina and this defendant, Mr. Kingsley. Mr. Kingsley with his arms and his hands around Robert's neck, treating him like a doll, while Mr. Farina tries to shove a rag down his throat. He's gagged, he's choked, he's punched, he's yanked by the neck, he's dragged off the gurney by Mr. Kingsley and one of his accomplices by the neck and taken over in the corner for God only knows what purpose. He has no means to defend.
It was alleged that he was sexually assaulted when he was brought over to that window. I have never heard any proof of it, but if there is, if it is brought up at trial, we'll hear about it. But I would imagine that there would be extra charges for that. Ed, your thoughts?
Well, I thought if I recall correctly, what I viewed was that's where he actually got choked out.
Right.
In that corner.
They lifted him up off the ground.
His feet were dangling.
Yes. Yeah. And that could possibly be when his hyoid bone was broken, because that's almost like a hanging when you're kind of taking him up on all of his body weight.
Defend himself because his hands are cuffed behind his back during this whole process. So what does Mr. Gallagher do? Does he return to the human race and say, enough? Stop this now? No, he goes out to his car to get some leg irons. And now we're going to argue to you that he was just following orders to leg iron a man that is moments away from death. Shockingly, after Mr. Gallagher retrieves the leg irons, when you see his body-worn camera, he zips up his jacket. So for 9.5 minutes, we see the inside of Mr. Gallagher's jacket instead of seeing what he was doing. Now, why do you think that happened? You'll know by the time this proof is concluded. Contrary to human experience, apparently it got colder inside and he had to zip up his jacket. Mr. Gallagher had a free will. He had human intelligence. He had training. He saw a man being beaten. He had no obligation, no duty, and God help us all, no human decency to put leg irons on that man. He participated in that death. He aided everyone that was there, and that's what the evidence will show and proved. An ambulance wasn't called for Robert until 9:40 p.m. They rush him to Wynn Hospital. He has no chance. Despite Herculean efforts, he is pronounced dead. Now, many months later, we appear in this courtroom because an indictment has been returned against these three men and others. Mr. Kiefer is charged with offering a false instrument for filing in the first degree. I'm going to make reference to the indictment in reverse order of severity. That's a very fancy way of saying he was required by law to fill out a document, and the man that is going to sit there during this trial, Mr. Kiefer, and say, I didn't break any law. I'm not guilty. I'm presumed innocent. He bald-faced lied in his report. Here's what he said. Prior to entering the emergency room of the infirmary, all force ceased being used against Robert Brooks.
Oh, my God. So Kiefer, one of three of the defendants here, as we heard Mr. Fitzpatrick lay out in front of the jury, wrote that all force ceased once he came into the infirmary, into the building.
Before he entered the infirmary, yeah.
Yeah, which is the furthest thing from the truth.
That's his story then. You'll see him walking around, looking in, participating, chuckling, hanging with his fellow gang members, while this poor 43-year-old, 148-pound guy is being pummeled like a rag doll a few feet away from him. I will ask you to convict Mr. Kiefer of that count. The defendants, Mr. Gallagher and Mr. Kiefer, are charged with gang assault in the second degree. I must and I will prove to you that they had intent to cause physical injury to Robert Brooks. Good Lord. Did they intend to cause physical injury?
They killed
You
him.
won't have any doubt of that whatsoever. They were aided by multiple people. They caused serious physical injury to him. Good Lord, they caused his death. And I will ask you to return a verdict of guilty against Mr. Gallagher and Mr. Kiefer for gang assault. The second count charges these three defendants with manslaughter in the first degree, intending to cause injury to the defendant Robert Brooks, serious physical injury, and acting in concert with each other. Sounds complicated at first, but when you boil it down, it's pretty simple. You're going to see massive evidence that this gang, this whole group of these people that stopped being corrections officers the moment Robert got off that bus, that their motive, their operandi was to cause serious physical injury to this man, and they wound up causing his death. And the final count, the most serious count, depraved indifference to human life. Depraved indifference to human life. Nicholas Anzalone, David Kingsley, Anthony Farina, Christopher Walworth, Matthew Gallagher, Nicholas Kiefer, three of them on trial here today. You won't have any doubt whatsoever that their conduct evinced a depraved indifference to human life. When you watch this video, the first words that pop into your mind are going to be depravity, indifference, recklessness. Difficult to watch, but I'm counting on you to do that. Christopher Walworth, Nicholas Anzalone, Nicholas Kiefer, Mr. Gallagher, Mr. Kingsley. Mr. Brooks was at various times restrained. He was beaten. He was choked. He was strangled. He was gagged. He was forcibly moved and kicked, all with minimal or no resistance on his part and with absolutely zero legitimate law enforcement purpose. These assaults were perpetrated while the defendants were acting in concert with each other. With depraved indifference, they did nothing to restrain each other, did nothing to stop the beatings, and failed to immediately order medical assistance.
Hey guys, I just want to say thank you, Bonnie, for being here. Bonnie is a friend from upstate. I come to meet her through this case, and she has a loved one incarcerated as well in these facilities up in the New York State Department of Corrections. I'm sending you strength, prayers, and positive vibes, Bonnie. Always, you know, I'm just a phone call away or a text message away. So much love to you and your family.
The indictment alleges, and the medical examiner will so testify, that Mr. Brooks suffered injuries to his head, to his neck, severe injuries to his neck, his hyoid bone, his thyroid cartilage, his torso, his liver, his spleen, his testicles, each and every blow contributing to his death as it put added strain on his heart, as his body gasped and choked for blood because he couldn't breathe because of the blood rushing into his airways. Blood as a result of the beatings these three defendants and their fellow gang members inflicted upon him. If I'm able to get it into evidence, and I hope I will, you will see Department of Corrections and Community Supervision's rules and guidelines regarding an individual corrections officer's duty to intervene. Duty to intervene. It is not complicated. When you see what you will see with your own eyes, and you realize that these three men did nothing to intervene, I ask you just please follow your oaths. Follow your oaths and follow the facts in this case. I will show you all three of these defendants have signed acknowledgments within a year of this homicide, that they all acknowledged being trained in that area and understood what their duties were. And they don't get to change that because it's October of 2025. You'll see the signed form by David Kingsley.
Welcome, Lori.
You'll see a signed form by Matthew Gallagher. You'll see a signed form by Nicholas Kiefer. You're not supposed to help and stand by while others beat an inmate to death. It really ain't that complicated. You'll see, as I already alluded to, Mr. Kiefer's use of force report, which is a total fabrication. It's complete nonsense. You'll see a use of force memo by Mr. Kingsley. Again, glaring by its omissions. If you read the use of force memo, you'd think that Robert tripped on a piece of ice on his way into the infirmary. Now, how can I tell you with such certainty that I will prove all of these things to you? Because my most important witness in this case, ladies and gentlemen, there's 4 of them. They're body-worn cameras, about the size, a little bigger than a pack of cigarettes. All 3 of these defendants are supposed to wear them and supposed to activate them every time there's an encounter. Not only did they not activate them, Mr. Gallagher went so far as to cover his up as he zipped up his jacket. You know how many of these defendants activated their cameras?
None.
0. Not one. 9:26, when Mr. Brooks is a danger to absolutely no one, Mr. Gallagher, at Sergeant Trombley's direction, goes out to retrieve leg irons. And then at exactly 9:26 and 33 seconds, he zips up his jacket. The evidence is going to show that the rest of these defendants were unaware that video was being made. Can you imagine what this trial would be like if I didn't have those videos?
It wouldn't be.
Can you imagine what their stories would be? We already know what Mr. Kiefer's story is. Nothing happened after he entered the emergency room. You'll see that that's completely fallacious. If I didn't have these tapes, I'd be listening to stories about, oh, it was icy out. He was resisting arrest. We bravely had to defend ourselves. And we were barely able to restrain him because he was in a psychotic rage from some drug. But they didn't know that each of these 4 body-worn cameras from 4 separate corrections officers were storing data that the New York State Police were able to recover. And you'll hear about that, and you'll see these tapes in all their depravity. I won't have to say much as I show those videos to you. I won't have to. Because if you're the people I think you are, you'll know exactly what happened. There's no audio, and you will have ample time during the course of this trial to familiarize yourself exactly who is who on that tape. You won't get it the first time, trust me. It's difficult sometimes. You'll be able to tell Robert Brooks because he's the one bleeding and dying. You'll see a composite of all of those tapes together. And then when I finish presenting that tape to you, remind yourself that these 3 defendants are sitting here telling you, we broke no laws. You know, I go to Disney World a lot. My favorite ride is Pirates of the Caribbean. I'm not ashamed to admit that. But as you walk in, if any of you have ever been there, there's this baritone voice that says, dead men tell no tales. That's not true. It's Robert Brooks in death is going to tell you what caused his death. We're going to present to you Dr. Katya Merkulova, and she is going to describe to you in excruciating detail the injuries that Robert suffered, the number of injuries that he suffered, the lethality of the force used, how each one of these blows, as I mentioned earlier, put strain on his failing heart. She'll tell you that Robert had a synthetic drug in his system, and she will very, very clearly tell you how that had absolutely nothing to do with his death or with his conduct. In fact, the only thing it had to do with it is probably ameliorated some of the pain that he was suffering. These defendants took Robert's life, these three and others, with such callousness and such brutality that it will probably take her close to an hour just to describe to you each and every wound that he suffered. Wounds to the right side of his head, his neck, his torso, his groin. All while these defendants were smiling, joking, checking the time, pepper spraying him, cuffing his legs, telling the nurses, don't come in the room, nothing to see here, until it was way too late to save Robert. For the depravity, the indifference, the gross recklessness, the utter lack of urgency, you're going to look at a room full of people that look like they have about as much care as they do as to whether or not it's going to rain a month from now. They're just going about what they do. And I'll ask you to convict Mr. Kingsley because of the gross abuse that he, and you will see it, inflicted on Robert's neck, the beatings that he participated in. I'll ask you to convict Mr. Gallagher, who made it easier for these people to inflict this pain, who tried to prevent you from seeing what he was doing, who restrained this guy's legs, and he's going to tell you that it was part of his training? Where do you see Robert lying on that gurney? And you tell me what world an individual lives in to say that's part of my training. And Nicholas Kiefer, the brave pepper sprayer who had no idea what was going on, just rushed into a scene and joined in the beating. They murdered Robert. They murdered him with a depraved indifference to human life. I wish each and every one of you Godspeed over the next couple of days. And I can't imagine a better place for justice to be than this courtroom with you good people. And I thank you for your kind attention.
That was a great opening statement, Ed. I know you got a lot to say, but again, he covered every ground of what happened here. The only thing that, for me and for I think everybody, the fact that these folks were able to roam free and enjoy family time without being in jail is the real disgusting part. I think these three will be found guilty and be sentenced to 25 to life. But if there's anything to take away from this is what's the Department of Corrections doing to stop this? I don't hear anything going on. And Bonnie just received a free membership in the chat. She just said her family member is in Marcy Corrections, and there's nothing changed. They're back to what they're normally doing there. So Bonnie has confirmed it because I know she talks to her loved one on a regular basis. So she has a heartbeat of what's going on inside. And do you think New York State Department of Corrections is doing anything to correct this, Ed?
No, I haven't heard of anything. I know the governor said that they were going to form a task force and make some changes, but I haven't heard of anything ever since. Yeah.
And that's the crazy part. So I want to go to the chat. You guys have any questions? Hashtag DutyRon, hashtag Ed. How many of you guys at the end of this, because we're going to segue out in a few minutes, how many of you guys want to see this video? It's like 5 or 6 or more different angles. I could play it at the end. Ed and I will be, we have to get on with our days here. But how many of you guys want to see that? Because I would like to play it for you guys. And maybe what we'll do is have Kristen maybe upload it, solo, and then we can upload it with some of our commentary. But I just want to get an idea of how many of you guys want to see that. It's tough to look at. And I'll be honest with you, if you suffer from PTSD or any type of mental health issues, this will really put you over the top because you're watching someone being murdered by a gang of correction officers. Bonnie said in the chat, she confirmed it, that she's here listening to us. Can't find it, but she said, oh, here it is. Nope, nothing, Ron. Not anything changed. Governor Hochul, who in my eyes is a piece of garbage, she's on to other things now. She's forgotten about this. And who suffers? The people who are incarcerated. So I don't think she really gives a rat's ass about what's going on. A lot of people want to see it. It is hard to see. So maybe we'll work on that. We'll get Kristen to upload some of the commentary from this live stream. And I looked at this stuff. Look, this is from a bona fide news channel, and it has 103 views. That video that I just played. So somebody or whoever's controlling the media does not want this story to be out for people to see. And that's the shame of it. And that will never stop me. That'll never stop you, Ed, from talking about this stuff. Because the media controls how everything gets out. And YouTube is their own entity. They decide what they want to open up and let everybody see. As you can see, there's very few people watching this. But at the end of the day, it's a sad situation, because even these media outlets from upstate, here's another one with 642 views about trial day 2. It just doesn't make sense. Anyways, I want to thank everybody for being here. We love and respect you all. Welcome to all the new members. Thank you to anybody and everyone who's given super chats. There's a couple of them. I want to highlight them real quick. I gave out the memberships. Jeff, thank you for the 2. Ali Books, thank you for being here. Remember, for 6 months, she said, great being here. It's great to have you. Sharing creates. That makes it to trial relatively quick. This made it to trial relatively quick. Yes, it damn sure did, and I'm happy. Jeff, thank you again. And then I gifted out another 10 memberships. So again, on behalf of Crime Time with DutyRon and Ed Wallace, we want to thank you. We are going to be looking at this as each day goes by, and we will update you guys on how this goes. And at the end, when the jury brings down their verdict, we will, if it's live, we'll cover it live. If not, we'll upload it. Ed, any final words for the audience?
Well, let's just pray that we can make some effective change here in our society, that the lawmakers do the right thing here and correct some of these loopholes that are out there that allow things like this to keep reoccurring. With that said, thank you for your time and spending your time with us, your precious time. Always be safe, be prepared, and watch your 6.
Amen to that. And I want to send strength, prayers, and positive vibes to the Brooks family, to his extended family, and to all of the families out there who have loved ones inside the Department of Corrections who are probably really, really upset right now and very nervous and worried. Is my loved one going to be next? There's so many people out there. Bonnie's one of them. Again, if you have a loved one incarcerated in the state of New York, let us know. Go over to DutyRon.com. Again, I'm sick. I'm going through the gigs here. I'm down and out. You guys seen it. I haven't been on lately, and I've got a whole bunch of issues that I'm battling. And I'll be better. I'll get back to normal soon. But in the meantime, thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting, and we love you. See you guys all soon. Peace and love from Crime Time with DutyRon and Ed.